Breaking news. Private jet belonging to Bennett Continental has lost contact over the Pacific Pan.
Ashford Manor stood on a hill overlooking 300 acres of rolling green land. The iron gates at its entrance opened into a long curved driveway lined with white oak trees that had stood there for decades. In the early mornings, soft mist would rise from the fields, and the manor would look like something from a dream. The house itself was built of pale stone, with tall windows that caught the sunlight and turned it into sheets of gold across the marble floors. Inside, the air always felt calm. The walls were decorated with rare artwork and framed photographs of charity projects from around the world. A large grandfather clock stood at the end of the main hallway, its steady ticking a quiet reminder that time moved gently within those walls. 17-year-old Aria Bennett had grown up in this sanctuary of light and comfort. To the outside world, she was the daughter of one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. But inside Ashford Manor, she was simply Aria, a girl with bright almond-shaped eyes, rich brown skin, and natural black curls that framed her face like a crown. Aria lived in luxury, but she had never been taught to worship it. Her father, Jonathan Bennett, was known as a titan in the world of global shipping and logistics. Bennett Continental Holdings had started as a small freight operation years ago. Through discipline, intelligence, and bold decisions, Jonathan had turned it into a worldwide empire. Ships with the Bennett insignia moved across oceans. Planes carrying company cargo crossed continents daily. His name appeared in financial magazines, on business panels, and at international forums. But to Aria, he was simply Dad. He had a deep voice that carried warmth. When he hugged her, it felt like being wrapped in safety itself. Every Saturday morning, no matter how busy his schedule was, he visited the poorest neighborhoods in Port Aurelia. He did not just write checks and leave. He sat with families. He listened. He shook hands. He remembered names. Wealth, Jonathan often said, placing a steady hand on Aria's shoulder, is a bridge, not a throne. If you sit on it, you fall. If you use it, you build. Her mother, Eleanor Bennett, carried kindness like it was woven into her soul. She managed the Eleanor Light Initiative, a foundation that funded schools, medical centers, and shelters across the country. She organized large charity galas that filled ballrooms with crystal chandeliers and famous guests. But when the lights dimmed and the cameras left, she stayed behind to make sure the catering staff received bonuses and that every worker had safe transportation home. Aria had watched her parents give without hesitation. She had watched them treat every person, from CEOs to janitors, with the same respect. Because of that, she carried herself differently at Kingswell Academy. Kingswell was the kind of private institution where the children of politicians, royalty, and billionaires studied. The uniforms were perfectly pressed. The hallways smelled of polished wood and ambition. Many of her classmates carried themselves with quiet arrogance. Aria did not. She excelled in her studies, especially in debate and mock trials. Teachers praised her discipline and intelligence. But what they admired most was her humility. She never used her last name to command attention. She never reminded anyone of her wealth. She believed what her father taught her. Wealth was a bridge, and she wanted to build. Within Ashford Manor, the east section known as the Briar Wing housed her uncle Victor Bennett and his wife, Clarissa. Victor was Jonathan's younger brother. He had a stocky build and sharp features that could shift easily from charm to frustration. Over the years, he had attempted several business ventures: restaurants, tech startups, real estate investments. None had succeeded. Clarissa, elegant and always well-dressed, carried herself with graceful smiles that rarely reached her eyes. She wore designer clothing and spoke softly, often dabbing at her eyes during difficult conversations. Many evenings, the extended family gathered in the grand dining room. The mahogany table could seat 20, but most nights it held only the Bennetts and their relatives. Victor would lean back in his chair, sigh deeply, and explain how the market had turned against him again. Just a temporary setback, he would say. The quarter was brutal. Clarissa would squeeze his arm, her voice trembling. We might lose the house this time. Without hesitation, Jonathan would reach into his jacket pocket and pull out his fountain pen. Aria had grown used to the scratch of ink against paper. Family is family, her father would say calmly. We don't let our own sink. A check for $200,000 would slide across the table. Clarissa would smile, thanking him warmly. Victor would nod, promising to repay it soon. Aria watched these exchanges with pride. She saw her father's generosity as strength. She felt proud that their abundance allowed others to live comfortably. When she noticed Clarissa's new handbags or Victor's polished watches, she did not question it. She believed kindness would always be honored. The final morning before everything changed began with sunlight. Ashford Manor glowed beneath a clear sky. The windows shimmered. Fresh lilies filled the foyer with a clean, sweet scent. Arya stood near the staircase wearing her Kingswell blazer. Her curls were carefully styled and a slim headband held them neatly back. She was preparing for a day of classes, unaware that this would be the last ordinary morning she would know. Jonathan and Eleanor were preparing to leave for a charity conference in Seoul. The trip had been planned for months. They would be gone only a few days. Jonathan adjusted his charcoal suit jacket and turned to his daughter. "Study hard, Arya," he said gently. "We'll be back before the weekend. I've already spoken to the dean about your early graduation ceremony." Eleanor stepped forward and kissed Arya's cheek. "Victor and Clarissa will stay here while we're gone. Clarissa wants to take you shopping for a new gown." Arya smiled. "Safe travels. I love you both." She stood at the entrance as the silver limousine rolled down the curved driveway and disappeared beyond the gates. The day passed quietly. At Kingswell, she won her mock trial exercise. She felt confident and excited to tell her parents about it when they returned. But by evening the weather began to change. Dark clouds gathered over Port Aurelia. The sky turned a deep shade of purple-gray. Wind brushed harshly against the manor windows. Victor and Clarissa arrived early and settled into the library. A bottle of Jonathan's most expensive vintage wine stood open on the side table. The golden ceiling reflected the soft light of the lamps. Arya noticed how their eyes wandered around the room. They lingered on the artwork, the antique furniture, the walls. There was something unreadable in their expressions, but she was too young to fully understand it. The storm outside intensified. Thunder rolled across the sky. Then the landline phone rang sharply, cutting through the quiet. Moments later, the television in the sitting room flickered to life. Arya stepped into the kitchen just as a red banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Breaking news. Private jet belonging to Bennett Continental Holdings has lost contact over the Pacific. Severe storm conditions reported. Search and rescue operations underway." The tray in the chef's hand slipped and crashed to the floor. Arya felt the air leave her lungs. She walked slowly toward the library, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Victor and Clarissa were standing before the television, bathed in blue light. They were not crying. They were not calling anyone. Victor looked at his watch calmly. "The search area is enormous," he said in a measured voice. "In weather like this, survival odds are low." Clarissa's gaze drifted toward the painting on the far wall, the one that concealed the safe behind it. Arya stood frozen in the center of the room. The storm howled outside. The television repeated the breaking news. No one moved to comfort her. No one reached for her hand. The only sound that remained steady was the ticking of the grandfather clock at the end of the hall. Tick, tick, tick. For the first time in her life, Arya Bennett felt something shift beneath her feet. And deep in her chest, beneath the fear and confusion, she sensed that something was very wrong. The storm that had filled the sky the night the jet disappeared did not end quickly. It continued in different forms: rain, wind, cold gray clouds that hung above Port Aurelia like a heavy warning. Inside Ashford Manor the air felt different too. The warmth that used to live in the walls was gone. The house still smelled like polished wood and fresh flowers, but the peace had vanished, replaced by tension that sat on every surface like dust. For Arya Bennett, time stopped and sped up at the same time. In the first hours after the breaking news, she moved through the manor like someone walking inside a nightmare. She kept checking her phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything that would say her parents were safe. The news stations repeated the same lines again and again. Lost contact, severe weather, search and rescue, no confirmed survivors. Victor and Clarissa stayed inside the house and acted as though the shock was something ordinary. They did not hold Arya. They did not sit beside her. They did not pray with her. Instead, they whispered to each other behind closed doors, speaking in low voices that stopped as soon as Arya entered a room. By morning, Victor began making phone calls. At first, Arya believed he was calling the Coast Guard, the airline officials, or anyone who might help. She even wanted to thank him because she still believed family meant protection. But she was wrong. Within 24 hours, strange people began arriving at Ashford Manor. Men in tailored suits. Women with briefcases. People who walked through the mansion like they already owned it. They spoke to Victor in the study and treated Clarissa like the new lady of the house. Arya tried to ask questions. "What's happening?" she asked one afternoon, her voice thin from lack of sleep. "Who are those people?" Victor's response was calm but cold. "Adult matters, Arya. Go to your room." Arya did not go. She followed the sound of voices to the study. The door was slightly open. Through the gap, she saw documents spread across the large desk, papers stamped, signed, and clipped into thick folders. She heard words she did not understand fully, but they carried weight. Probate. Executor. Assets. Guardianship. The next morning, exactly 48 hours after the jet vanished, the real invasion began. Crawford and Bellamy Associates arrived. Arya recognized the name. It was a powerful law firm. Her father had used them for large corporate cases, especially when the company expanded to new regions. Jonathan Bennett had always said they were skilled but expensive. And he trusted them, at least he thought he did. A line of black cars pulled into the manor driveway. 4 men stepped out, all in dark suits, carrying briefcases and boxes. One woman followed, her hair pulled back tightly, her expression sharp and official. Victor welcomed them like honored guests. Clarissa stood beside him, wearing a fitted cream blouse and diamond earrings that Arya was sure her mother had once gifted her. Clarissa's lips curved in a polite smile, but her eyes were cold and restless. Arya walked into the foyer as the lawyers entered. The grand space was bright with natural light, but the mood was dark. The tall marble pillars suddenly looked like prison walls. A man from Crawford and Bellamy adjusted his glasses and glanced at Arya briefly, then looked away as though she was furniture. "Where is my father?" Arya demanded, her voice trembling. "Why are you here? Why are you carrying boxes into my home?" Victor turned to her slowly, his face serious in a way that felt practiced. "Arya," he said, "your parents are presumed dead." The words hit her like a slap. "No," she whispered. "No. They're searching. They haven't found them." "You can't say that." Victor did not soften. "The world doesn't stop because you don't want to accept reality," he said. Arya's stomach twisted. She looked at the lawyers. "You can't do anything until there's confirmation," she said, trying to hold on to logic. "There's no death certificate. There's no proof." The woman from the law firm stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "Miss Bennett," she said with a voice that sounded like cold paper, "there are emergency provisions in place for cases like this. Legal procedures can begin when there is a high probability of death, especially when the assets are of significant value." Arya blinked rapidly. Her eyes burned. "What does that mean?" she asked. "What are you doing?" Victor reached out and took the folder from the woman. He opened it with slow confidence. "Your father prepared documents," Victor said. "He named me the sole executive of Bennett Continental Holdings, and the temporary guardian of the estate until everything is settled." Arya stared at him. "My father would never do that," she said. "Never. He wouldn't cut me out like that." Victor's mouth tightened. "You don't know what your father did behind closed doors," he replied. "He wanted stability. He wanted someone experienced to handle everything." Arya's hands began to shake. "Let me see the documents," she demanded. Victor held them out just enough for her to glimpse signatures and stamps. She saw her father's name. She saw her mother's name. But something about it felt wrong. Jonathan Bennett's signature had a certain flow, a habit of pressure and curve. This one looked too neat, too forced, like someone had copied it slowly. "That's not his handwriting," Arya whispered. Victor's eyes hardened. "It's legal," he said. "That's all that matters." As Arya stood there, trying to breathe, a group of men in gray uniforms walked into the foyer behind the lawyers. They carried tools and packaging supplies. One of them wheeled in a large crate. Arya turned sharply. "What are you doing?" she cried. The men did not answer her. They moved past her with professional silence, heading toward the hallway where her mother's sculptures were displayed, art pieces Eleanor loved deeply. Pieces she had collected during charity tours, each with a story, each with meaning. Arya ran after them. "Stop," she shouted. "You can't take that. That belongs to my mother." One of the movers paused, looking uncomfortable. But before he could respond, Clarissa walked into the hallway behind Arya, her heels clicking like tiny hammers on the marble floor. "It's not your mother's anymore," Clarissa said casually. Arya turned, disbelief rising in her throat. "What did you say?" Clarissa's voice remained calm. "The estate is being reorganized. Some things will be moved." Arya's eyes filled with tears. "You don't even sound sad," she said. "My parents might be dead and you're talking about moving things like it's a shopping trip." Victor approached from behind her. "Enough," he said. Arya spun around. "No," she said loudly. "This is wrong. You're doing something wrong. You're stealing." Victor grabbed her arm. His grip was sudden and brutal. Not the gentle hold of a family member. It was a clamp. His fingers pressed into her skin hard enough to make her gasp. Arya tried to pull away, but he leaned down close to her face. His breath smelled of expensive alcohol. "Listen," he hissed, his eyes sharp and full of danger. "Your parents are gone. This house is mine now. The company is mine. Everything is mine." Arya's breathing became tight. "You can't." Victor squeezed her arm harder. "If you speak to the police, the press, or any outsider," he said slowly, "you will disappear like that plane. Do you understand me?" The words froze her blood. Arya's lips parted, but no sound came out. Fear wrapped itself around her throat. Clarissa stepped closer, folding her arms. "Throw her out," Clarissa said coldly. "The cleaners are coming. I don't want her dirt on the floors." Arya stared at Clarissa in shock. "Aunt Clarissa," she whispered. "Please. I'm family." Clarissa's eyes did not soften. "You're a problem," she said. "And problems get removed." Victor shoved Arya forward. The world tilted. Her feet stumbled over the polished floor as he dragged her toward the massive oak doors at the entrance. She tried to resist, but her body was weak from grief and exhaustion. "Stop," Arya cried. "Please? I don't have anywhere to go." Victor yanked the doors open. Cold air rushed in like a slap. Rain poured down in hard sheets, soaking the front steps. Victor shoved her outside. Arya fell forward onto the wet stone, her palms burning from the impact. She turned quickly, reaching out, but the doors were already closing. "Uncle Victor," she screamed. "Please?" Clarissa stood behind him in the warm light of the foyer. She watched without emotion as Victor slammed the doors shut. The sound was deep and final. Thud. Arya stumbled to her feet, shaking. Rain soaked her school uniform. Her blazer clung to her body like a heavy weight. Her hair began to dampen and flatten. Her chest felt like it was splitting open. In her hands she clutched the only thing she managed to keep, a small framed photo of her parents. The glass was cracked from the fall, but the picture still showed Jonathan and Eleanor smiling, holding her between them. Arya pressed it against her chest like it could protect her. The storm raged above Ashford Manor, but it felt like the storm was now inside her. She stood there alone on the front steps, soaked, shaking and terrified, while behind the closed doors her home was being stripped away. And the world that once called her Arya Bennett had suddenly decided she was nothing. The days after Arya was thrown out of Ashford Manor did not pass in hours. They passed in survival. At first she stayed near the edge of the estate grounds, hiding behind trees and stone walls, hoping someone would come for her. Hoping the doors would reopen. Hoping her uncle would step outside and say it was all a mistake. No one came. By the third night, the cold drove her away from the familiar streets of her childhood. She walked without direction, her school shoes soaked and her stomach aching from hunger. She did not cry loudly anymore. Tears wasted strength. Weeks passed. Arya found herself in the Iron Point Quarter, an industrial district on the outskirts of Port Aurelia. It was a place of abandoned warehouses, broken streetlights, and rusted fences. The air smelled of metal, oil, and damp concrete. The tall factory buildings blocked the sun, turning every afternoon into early evening. No one looked at her twice there. The first night in Iron Point, she slept beneath a loading dock. The ground was hard and damp. Every sound felt dangerous. The scrape of rats, the echo of distant footsteps, the wind slipping through broken windows. Her stomach growled constantly. Hunger became a voice inside her, loud and demanding. It made her dizzy. It made her vision blur at the edges. One afternoon, while searching behind a closed cafe near the district's edge, she found an oversized navy jacket tossed into a dumpster. It was stained and smelled of old rainwater, but it was thick. She pulled it over her blazer. The sleeves hung past her hands. The fabric swallowed her frame. But it kept the wind from biting directly into her bones. She stopped thinking about how she looked. In the first week, she still tried to keep her curls neat. She searched for public restroom sinks to splash water onto her hair. She tried to smooth it with her fingers. By the second week, the effort felt pointless. Rain soaked it daily. Wind tangled it. Dust clung to it. Slowly, her once proud curls began to knot and clump together. Without brushes, without oil, without warmth, her hair matted into a tangled crown that framed a face growing thinner by the day. Her reflection in store windows startled her sometimes. She did not look like Arya Bennett. She looked like someone erased. She learned quickly that speaking was dangerous. After that, she stopped speaking. Instead, she stood silently near bakery doors or convenience stores, hoping someone might leave behind scraps. Sometimes she found stale bread in trash bins. Sometimes she found nothing. She discovered the art of silent begging, standing close enough to be noticed but not close enough to anger. Lowering her gaze, making herself small. The Iron Point quarter had its own rhythm. During the day, trucks moved in and out. Workers shouted over machinery. At night, the district grew hollow and cold. But there was something else there. Black SUVs. The first time she saw one, her heart nearly stopped. The vehicle rolled slowly down the narrow street, tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. It did not belong in Iron Point. It moved too carefully, too deliberately. She recognized the model. Victor's car had looked similar. Arya froze against the brick wall as the SUV passed. The headlights swept across her face briefly before moving on. The next day she saw another one, and the day after that. They did not stop. They did not approach her directly. But they patrolled. The Gray Sentinels. She did not know their name, but she understood their purpose. Victor had not simply thrown her away. He had made sure she stayed buried. He was monitoring her existence. Every time she heard the low rumble of an engine, her body reacted before her mind did. Her chest tightened. Her breath shortened. She searched for shadows to hide in. One night, as freezing rain turned the pavement slick and shining, she made a mistake. She slipped while crossing a dark alley and fell hard against the ground. The impact split her lip against the edge of a broken crate. Warm blood mixed with rainwater and ran down her chin. She pushed herself up, dizzy and shaking. That was when the headlights appeared at the mouth of the alley. A black SUV. It slowed. Arya's heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled backward, her hands scraping against the rough pavement. She dove behind a large metal dumpster overflowing with plastic bags. The SUV crept forward. The engine hummed. She pressed herself flat against the cold metal, holding her breath until her lungs burned. The taste of blood filled her mouth. Rain soaked through her jacket, turning it heavy. Through a crack in the dumpster's side, she saw the vehicle's tinted window pause near the alley entrance. Waiting. She did not move. Seconds stretched into something unbearable. Finally, the SUV rolled forward and disappeared into the mist. Arya remained still long after it was gone. When she finally stood, her body trembled, not just from cold, but from the knowledge that she was being hunted without chains. Watched without being touched. Hunger hollowed her further. Her cheeks sank inward. Her skin grew ashy beneath the dust and cold. But something else changed inside her too. Fear, when repeated often enough, becomes numbness. She stopped reacting to insults from strangers. She stopped reacting to cold stares. She moved quietly, blending into walls and shadows. She became a ghost. The girl who once debated confidently in bright classrooms now avoided eye contact. The daughter of Jonathan and Eleanor Bennett learned how to disappear in plain sight. Still, somewhere deep inside her chest, something refused to die. Every night before sleeping on flattened cardboard, she pulled out the cracked photo of her parents. The glass had chipped further, but their smiles remained untouched. She whispered apologies to them. And she promised she would survive. One evening, after weeks in Iron Point, Arya noticed something beyond the industrial skyline. What? Tall buildings shimmered in the distance, their windows glowing gold against the darkening sky. The high-rise district. The world she had once belonged to. Something inside her stirred. Iron Point had become a cage. The Gray Sentinels knew its streets too well. She needed distance. She needed movement. So she walked. Her steps were slow at first. Her shoes were worn thin. Each step sent sharp pain through her feet. But she kept going, guided by the distant lights. As she moved closer to the high-rise district, the weather shifted again. Snow began to fall. At first it was soft, tiny white flakes landing on her jacket. Then it thickened. Wind rose. The snow turned into a blinding storm. The sidewalks became slick with ice. Street signs blurred. Neon lights stretched into streaks of red and gold. Her breathing grew shallow. Her body felt heavier with every step. But she kept walking. The high-rise buildings grew taller around her, casting long shadows over the streets. Luxury cars passed, their headlights cutting through the snow. Then she saw them. Massive iron gates. Tall and intricate, guarded and imposing. Behind them stood a towering residence. Sleek, modern, powerful. A place where warmth lived above the storm. The Han River Tower residence. To anyone else it was a fortress of wealth. To Arya in that moment it looked like shelter. She reached the gate slowly. Her fingers were numb, stiff from cold. She touched the iron bars. They felt solid. Real. Her legs buckled. The exhaustion she had been fighting for weeks finally claimed her. The hunger. The fear. The cold. She sank to the ground, snow collecting in her matted hair. The cracked photo slipped partly from her jacket, still clutched in her hand. Her breathing slowed. The world around her blurred into white. The sound of wind faded into a distant hum. And as darkness swallowed her vision, Aria Bennett collapsed at the gates of a place she did not know would change her fate. Snow continued to fall in thick sheets across the entrance of the Han River Tower residence. The iron gates stood tall and unmoving, their dark metal collecting frost along the edges. The streets were nearly empty now. Most people had already rushed indoors to escape the worsening storm. Aria lay motionless against the base of the gate. Her navy jacket was soaked through. Snow gathered in her matted hair and along her eyelashes. Her fingers were still curled tightly around the cracked photo pressed against her chest. Her breathing was faint, shallow, barely visible in the freezing air. Then the low rumble of engines broke the silence. Headlights cut through the snow like sharp blades. A motorcade of 3 armored black sedans approached the gates in perfect formation. Their movement was smooth and deliberate, the kind that announced authority without noise. The lead vehicle stopped as the gates began to open automatically. But it halted abruptly. The headlights had revealed something on the ground. A small figure. The engine idled. Doors opened in quick succession. From the first vehicle stepped several security men in dark coats, their movements disciplined and alert. Among them was Seo Dae-hyun, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes trained to detect threats before they formed. He approached the gate cautiously, boots crunching over snow. When he reached the figure on the ground, he paused briefly. He saw only what the surface showed, an unconscious girl in torn clothes half buried in snow. A vagrant, he muttered under his breath. He bent down, grabbing the collar of her oversized jacket to pull her out of the path of the car. Before he could lift her fully, a voice came from behind him. Wait. It was not loud. But it carried weight. Seo Dae-hyun froze instantly. The rear door of the center sedan had opened. Kang Min-jae stepped out into the snow. He wore a tailored navy wool suit that fit his tall frame perfectly. Snowflakes landed on his dark hair and shoulders, but he did not react to the cold. His presence changed the air around him. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. He walked toward the gate with measured steps. Seo Dae-hyun straightened. Sir, it's just a street girl. I'll clear her immediately. Min-jae did not answer him right away. He crouched slightly, studying the unconscious figure. Snow clung to her lashes. Her skin was pale from cold. Her hair was tangled and heavy with ice. But as Seo Dae-hyun's grip shifted her slightly, her eyes flickered open for the briefest second. It was only a moment. Yet in that moment, Kang Min-jae saw something that did not belong on the face of a defeated girl. Defiance. Not fear. Not begging. There was something sharp behind her gaze, even through exhaustion. Something that refused to break. Her hand tightened weakly around the object pressed against her chest. Min-jae's eyes narrowed slightly. He had spent his life reading people. He knew the difference between surrender and survival. This was survival. He looked at Seo Dae-hyun. Release her. The command was quiet but absolute. Seo Dae-hyun stepped back immediately. Min-jae moved closer and lowered himself fully into the snow. Without hesitation, he slid one arm beneath the girl's knees and the other behind her back. She was light. Too light. Her body felt fragile, almost weightless beneath the layers of soaked fabric. Her head fell against his shoulder as he lifted her. Snow brushed against his polished shoes, soaking the edges. He did not look down. Cancel my meetings tomorrow, Min-jae said calmly. Seo Dae-hyun blinked. Sir, you have the council session and... Cancel them. There was no room for argument. And call Dr. Han Sung-woo, Min-jae continued. Tell him to prepare the medical suite immediately. Yes, sir. The rear door of the armored sedan was opened quickly. Min-jae stepped inside, shielding the girl's body from the wind as best he could. Snow followed them briefly before the door closed with a heavy, protective sound. Inside the car, warmth began to spread. Min-jae adjusted his hold carefully, making sure her head rested securely against him. Her breathing was uneven but steady enough. As the vehicle pulled forward through the gates, something slipped from inside her jacket. The cracked frame fell against Min-jae's arm. He looked down. The photograph was partially visible. A family portrait. A man in a suit. A woman in a soft dress. Between them stood a younger version of the girl he now held. He recognized the faces. Jonathan Bennett. Eleanor Bennett. His jaw tightened slightly. He did not speak. Outside, the gates closed behind the motorcade. The sedans moved smoothly up the private drive toward the base of the tower. Inside the car, the girl stirred faintly but did not wake. Her fingers still twitched around the edge of the frame. Min-jae picked up the photo carefully and slid it back inside her jacket, pressing it securely against her chest. He did not ask questions. He did not need explanations yet. The vehicle entered the underground access point of the tower. Security systems scanned and cleared them instantly. The car stopped. Seo Daehyun opened the door. Min-jae stepped out first, still carrying the girl. The lobby elevator doors were already open. They entered. The elevator rose silently at high speed, glass walls revealing blurred city lights beyond the storm. The ascent felt smooth and endless, climbing away from the freezing streets below. Min-jae remained still, his gaze fixed ahead. The elevator doors opened directly into a private floor. Bright, controlled lighting illuminated a space designed with sleek metal panels and polished floors. A team was already waiting near a side entrance. Dr. Han Sung-woo stood at the front, wearing a white coat over dark clothing. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he saw the girl's condition. "She's severely hypothermic," the doctor said quickly. "Bring her inside." They moved into the medical suite. The room was quiet, sterile, and softly lit. Advanced monitors lined the walls. A large bed covered in fine silk sheets stood in the center. Min-jae laid her down carefully. Medical staff worked efficiently. Wet clothing was removed. Warm blankets were placed over her. A heating system adjusted the room temperature instantly. Dr. Han examined her pulse. "She's malnourished," he said. "Exhausted. But she's alive." Min-jae stood at the foot of the bed, watching silently. The girl's hair was gently freed from snow and ice. The matted strands revealed faint traces of how thick and strong it once was. Her face, cleaned of dirt and cold residue, looked younger than the streets had made her seem. Fragile. But not broken. As warmth slowly returned to her skin, her breathing steadied. Dr. Han finished adjusting the monitors and nodded. "She'll need rest. We'll monitor her closely through the night." Min-jae did not respond. He moved toward the side of the bed and looked down at her one final time. The cracked photo remained hidden safely beneath the silk blanket. Outside the windows, snow continued to fall over the city. Inside the medical suite, Arya Bennett lay unconscious in silk sheets, her body finally shielded from the storm. The atmosphere in the penthouse changed the moment Kang Min-jae finished speaking. The medical suite no longer felt like a place of recovery. It felt like a command center waiting to awaken. Min-jae walked toward a sleek black console embedded into the wall opposite the bed. The surface appeared smooth and ordinary at first glance. He placed his palm lightly against it. The panel lit up instantly. Blue light spread outward beneath the glass like electricity racing through veins. Multiple holographic screens unfolded into the air, projecting data in crisp lines of code, financial records, satellite feeds, and encrypted files. Arya watched from the bed, silent. This was not a courtroom. This was not a negotiation. This was something else entirely. Min-jae's fingers moved across the interface with precision. He did not rush. Every command was deliberate. "Trace Bennett Continental Holdings," he instructed calmly. Streams of data appeared. Accounts, transactions, corporate structures, shell companies. He expanded one file after another, tracing the chain of authority that had shifted within 48 hours of the plane's disappearance. "Crawford and Bellamy Associates," he said next. Another cascade of information flooded the screens: legal filings, emergency probate documents, signatures, timestamps. Min-jae's eyes sharpened. "Cross-reference signatures against archived biometric samples," he ordered. Within seconds the system flagged discrepancies. Digital inconsistencies glowed red against the otherwise clean filings. Arya felt her pulse quicken. "You see," she whispered. Min-jae did not answer her. His focus remained on the screens. He traced the movement of funds next. "Show me transfers from the Eleanor Light Initiative," he said. A new screen flickered to life. The foundation accounts appeared, once full and stable. Then came the withdrawals. Large sums. Rapid movements. Redirected into private holding companies. Min-jae's jaw tightened slightly. "Follow the trail," he commanded. The system obeyed. Funds had been funneled into accounts under Victor Bennett's temporary executive authority. From there, portions were moved into offshore accounts registered under obscure corporate names. "Identify beneficial ownership," Min-jae said quietly. Within moments the veil lifted. Victor Bennett. Clarissa Bennett. Arya's stomach dropped. "They took from my mother's foundation," she said, her voice hollow. Min-jae's gaze remained fixed. "They diverted charity funds," he confirmed. Another screen opened automatically. A live video feed. A luxury boutique downtown. Arya leaned forward involuntarily. On the screen stood Victor and Clarissa. Victor examined an expensive watch under bright showroom lighting. Clarissa stood before a mirror, trying on an emerald necklace that shimmered against her collarbone. They were laughing. Their movements were relaxed, careless. Arya's fingers curled against the blanket. "That's today," she whispered. Minjae zoomed the feed slightly, capturing transaction details at the bottom of the display. "Payment source," he murmured. The screen highlighted the transaction account. It was linked directly to funds withdrawn from the Eleanor Light Initiative. Arya's chest tightened. "They aren't just stealing," she said quietly. "They're celebrating." Minjae closed the boutique feed and opened another channel. "Estate surveillance," he ordered. A new live image filled the largest screen. Ashford Manor. Workers were moving furniture across the marble floors. Clarissa stood in the foyer directing placement of decorative pieces. The grand staircase remained unchanged, but the air of the home felt altered even through the screen. Victor walked through the hallway with a glass in his hand, examining rooms as if inspecting property newly acquired. "They think it's theirs," Arya said. Minjae shifted his attention back to the legal filings. "Trace court authorization timeline," he said. A sequence of documents appeared in chronological order. Emergency probate filing. Temporary guardianship petition. Asset freeze request. Approval stamp. All processed within hours. Timestamp anomaly detected. The system flagged. Minjae leaned closer. The digital signature verification glowed red again. Forsh. He tapped another command. Access internal communications between Victor Bennett and Crawford and Bellamy senior partners. Encrypted emails appeared. Language coded carefully but the intent clear. Financial incentives, future retainers, mutual benefit. Arya stared at the floating screens, overwhelmed. "He moved before anyone could question it," she whispered. "Yes," Minjae replied evenly. "He moved fast." Another command. Locate offshore reserves. Maps unfolded across the holographic display, dots marking financial institutions across multiple jurisdictions. Hidden accounts. Safety nets. Insurance against exposure. Victor had built a shadow system beneath the stolen empire. Minjae's expression did not change. "He prepared for resistance," he said calmly. Arya swallowed. "So what happens now?" she asked. Minjae's eyes reflected the blue glow of the data streams. He reached forward and activated a master sequence. All screens synchronized. Transactions aligned. Legal filings cross-referenced. Surveillance feeds linked. Offshore accounts connected. The data began to cascade in accelerated patterns, numbers flowing downward like waterfalls of currency and code. Arya could feel the shift in the room. This was no longer analysis. This was positioning. Victor had relied on paper and intimidation. Minjae relied on infrastructure. The system began isolating vulnerabilities, fraud indicators, illegal transfers, corporate exposure points. "Prepare audit escalation," Minjae said quietly. The words sounded almost ceremonial. He looked at Arya for the first time since activating the console. "They wanted to sit on your throne," he said. "So we shall give them a coronation." Arya blinked, uncertain of his meaning. Minjae turned back to the screens. "Freeze offshore liquidity upon command," he continued. "Flag boutique transactions as fraudulent. Notify estate receiver for immediate compliance review." Each instruction registered instantly. The data streams grew more aggressive, highlighting red flags, freezing transaction pathways in real time. Arya watched as Victor's offshore balances flickered under system scrutiny. Not erased. Not yet. But marked. Tracked. Encircled. "This is not revenge," Minjae said calmly. "This is correction." The largest screen shifted to a city-wide financial network overview. Nodes representing institutions glowed in clusters. Victor's holdings appeared as a bright cluster near the center. Minjae isolated it. The surrounding network tightened visually. Encirclement. He removed his hand from the console briefly and looked at Arya. "They built their power on forged documents," he said. "They believe ownership is permanent." Arya's breathing steadied. "They're wrong," she replied softly. Minjae returned his hand to the interface. The final command did not execute yet. Instead, the system held at readiness. A digital blade suspended above a target. Minjae allowed the cascade to continue running diagnostics, mapping every account, every transaction, every weak seam. He was not striking blindly. He was calculating. The boutique feed reappeared in a smaller window. Victor laughed at something the salesperson said. Clarissa admired her reflection, unaware that every movement was being recorded. Arya felt a strange sensation. Not anger. Not fear. Something steadier. Control. The estate feed showed movers continuing to rearrange Ashford Manor. Victor paused briefly to glance at his phone, likely checking balances he assumed were secure. Minjae watched him through the screen. Let them enjoy the illusion, he said quietly. The console emitted a soft confirmation tone. All pathways identified. All vulnerabilities mapped. All financial arteries traced. The system was ready. Minjae stepped back slightly, folding his arms behind him. The blue glow illuminated his sharp features. The hunt had not begun in violence. It had begun in precision. And as the streams of data continued cascading across the screens, Victor Bennett remained unaware that the foundation beneath his stolen empire had already begun to crack. The hunt was initiated. News traveled fast in Port Aurelia, especially among the wealthy. It did not take long for Victor and Clarissa Bennett to learn that a young woman matching Arya's description had been seen entering the Han River Tower residence under heavy security. They had spent weeks controlling the narrative, telling associates that Arya had withdrawn from public life to grieve privately at Lake Lucerne Healing Estate. They had reassured investors that everything was stable. But stability depended on silence. And silence depended on Arya remaining unseen. The private elevator in the Han River Tower opened with a soft mechanical chime. Victor stepped out first. He wore a tailored dark suit, his posture stiff but polished. Clarissa followed closely behind, dressed in an elegant black coat and high heels that clicked sharply against the marble floor. Her face was carefully arranged into an expression of deep concern. A lace handkerchief rested in her hand. They did not look nervous. They looked rehearsed. The penthouse lobby was wide and minimalist, filled with soft lighting and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The air felt different here, controlled, heavy with quiet authority. Kang Min-jae stood near the center of the room. He was dressed in a dark suit, hands resting loosely at his sides. His expression was unreadable. Arya stood several steps behind him, dressed now in clean, simple clothing. Her hair had been restored as much as possible, though the experience of the streets still lingered in the thinness of her face. Victor spotted her instantly. "Oh, thank goodness," Clarissa cried before anyone could speak. She rushed forward a few steps, her voice breaking convincingly. "Arya, my poor girl. We've been terrified." Victor shook his head solemnly. "You had us searching everywhere," he said. "We thought you were safe at the retreat. When you disappeared, we feared the worst." Arya felt her pulse rise. Retreat. Lake Lucerne. The lie. "She has not disappeared," Min-jae said calmly. "She was found at my gates." Clarissa pressed her hand dramatically to her chest. "That's exactly what we were afraid of," she said. "Her mental state has been fragile. She ran away from the private retreat in Switzerland. She's been confused since the accident." Victor nodded gravely. "She's unstable. Grief can do that." Arya's hands trembled slightly at her sides. Unstable. Confused. The words hung in the air like poison. Clarissa stepped closer. "Darling," she said sweetly, reaching out. "Come here. Let's take you home. We have doctors waiting. You've frightened everyone." Her hand extended toward Arya's arm. Before her fingers could make contact, Min-jae stepped forward smoothly, placing himself between them. "She is not going anywhere," he said evenly. Clarissa's smile faltered for a split second before returning. "With respect," she replied, "this is a family matter. She belongs with us." Victor straightened slightly. "We are her legal guardians," he added. "The court has already granted temporary authority. You've been kind to help her, Mr. Kang, but we will take it from here." Min-jae's gaze shifted briefly toward Arya, then back to Victor. "Guardianship requires care," he said quietly. "Explain how she ended up unconscious in the snow." Victor's jaw tightened. "She fled supervision. We had no idea where she went." Clarissa nodded quickly. "She's been emotional. Irrational. We tried to protect her privacy by telling the press she was at Lake Lucerne Healing Estate." Arya felt something inside her snap. "That's not true," she said. Her voice was soft at first. Victor shot her a warning look. "Arya," he said sharply, "you're not well." She lifted her chin. "You threw me out," she said clearly. Silence fell. Clarissa laughed lightly. "See," she said. "Paranoia." Min-jae raised his hand slightly. The wall behind him flickered to life. A large screen illuminated the room. Victor's face drained of color. The boutique feed appeared. Victor stood at a display case examining a luxury watch. Clarissa adjusted an emerald necklace around her neck. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the screen. Clarissa's mouth opened slightly. "That's," she began. "Today," Minjae finished calmly. The transaction overlay appeared beneath the video. Account details scrolled across the bottom. Victor's breathing shifted. "You're spying on us," he said. "I am observing," Minjae replied. The screen shifted again. Bank transfers from the Eleanor Light Initiative flashed into view. Red markers highlighted large withdrawals. Arya felt her chest tighten again, but she did not look away. "They use charity funds," Minjae said quietly. "From the foundation your sister-in-law built." Victor's composure cracked. "You have no authority," he began. "Authority?" Minjae interrupted calmly. "You forged probate documents before a death certificate existed." Clarissa stepped backward. "That's a serious accusation," she whispered. "It is a serious crime," Minjae responded. The screen displayed side-by-side signature comparisons. The inconsistencies glowed. Victor's eyes flicked toward Arya. "You don't understand how business works," he said sharply. "This was necessary. For stability." Arya took a step forward. "No," she said firmly. "You moved within 48 hours. You froze my accounts. You bribed Crawford and Bellamy. You told the world I was unstable. And then you shoved me into the rain." Her voice did not shake this time. "You told me I would disappear like that plane if I spoke." Clarissa's face hardened. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You were hysterical." Minjae made a small gesture. From the shadows near the walls, 2 security guards stepped forward silently. Victor noticed them and stiffened. "This is illegal," he said. Minjae's expression remained calm. "You walked into my residence under false pretenses," he said. "You attempted to retrieve a witness under a fabricated mental health claim." Clarissa's hand tightened around her purse. "You can't hold us here," she said. Minjae stepped aside slightly. The elevator doors behind them reopened. But instead of revealing the lobby below, the interior lighting shifted darker. The direction panel glowed red. "Your visit is not finished," Minjae said evenly. Victor looked at the guards, then at Arya. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly to her. Arya did not answer. She no longer felt small. The guards positioned themselves on either side of Victor and Clarissa. Clarissa's confident posture dissolved into tension. "Where are we going?" she demanded. Minjae met her eyes. "To discuss legacy." Victor's jaw clenched as he was guided toward the elevator. The screens behind them dimmed, returning the room to its soft lighting. Arya remained standing near the center of the penthouse, her breathing steady now. Victor turned one last time before entering the elevator. His expression had changed. The control was gone. The elevator doors slid shut with a smooth mechanical sound. As they descended, not to the lobby but deeper, the silence in the penthouse settled heavily. The vultures had entered the dragon's den. And the doors had closed behind them. The elevator did not stop at the lobby. It descended past familiar floors into a restricted level rarely accessed by outsiders. When the doors opened, cold air met Victor and Clarissa's faces. The lighting was dimmer here, blue and silver tones reflecting off brushed steel walls. This was the inner sanctum. A vast chamber stretched before them. One entire wall was composed of massive digital screens fused seamlessly together, currently dark but humming faintly with stored power. In the center stood a sleek obsidian console, polished to a mirror finish. Security personnel positioned Victor and Clarissa several feet from the console. Kang Minjae entered moments later, calm and measured. Arya followed him. Victor noticed her presence and stiffened. Clarissa's breathing grew uneven. "What is this?" Victor demanded, trying to recover authority. "You can't detain us like criminals." Minjae did not respond immediately. He stepped behind the obsidian console and placed his hand upon its surface. The wall ignited. Screens burst to life in synchronized blue light. Financial records, account balances, property deeds, legal filings, all projected in massive clarity. Victor's eyes darted from screen to screen. "Your empire," Minjae said evenly, "is built on borrowed air." One screen zoomed into Victor's personal holdings. Offshore reserves blinked into view. Private accounts. Shell corporations. Clarissa swallowed. "You're invading our privacy," she said. "No," Minjae replied calmly. "I am correcting theft." His fingers moved across the interface. The first account balance flickered. Then it dropped. Victor's primary corporate reserve account, once filled with billions, began draining in controlled increments. Each transaction line flashed across the display, redirected back into Bennett Continental Holdings. Victor lunged forward instinctively, but two guards restrained him. "You can't just take," he shouted. "The funds were never yours," Minjay interrupted. Another screen displayed Ashford Manor. Live feed. Security personnel were entering through the gates. Clarissa's face drained of color. "What are they doing?" she whispered. "Reclaiming property," Minjay replied. The estate feed showed official receivership seals being placed on doors. Workers under legal supervision began reversing recent changes, restoring original furnishings, documenting alterations. Victor's breathing became shallow. "That's my home," Clarissa said. "It belongs to the Bennett estate," Minjay corrected. Another command. The offshore accounts flashed again. One by one they went dark. Wiped. Frozen. Seized under legal exposure triggers initiated by financial fraud indicators. Victor stared at the numbers vanishing in disbelief. "You're ruining everything," he muttered. "Everything you built was taken," Minjay said quietly. The screen shifted to a dealership surveillance feed. Victor's custom-built sports car sat in a showroom service bay. Uniformed representatives attached a repossession notice to the windshield. Clarissa gasped. "That car is fully paid." "Paid with diverted foundation funds," Minjay said. The boutique feed appeared next. Clarissa stood before a mirror wearing the emerald necklace. The screen split to show a fraud alert issued moments earlier. Security personnel entered the boutique floor. The necklace was removed from her in real time. Clarissa covered her mouth. "You humiliate us," she whispered. Minjay's gaze remained steady. Humiliation implies innocence. The digital wall transitioned again. Crawford and Bellamy Associates appeared on screen. Senior partners escorted out of their firm in handcuffs. Their faces were tight with fear and shame. Victor's composure shattered. "What did you do?" he demanded. "They confessed," Minjay replied. "Forgery. Bribery. Asset manipulation." The confessions played in muted clips across the wall, lawyers admitting to altered signatures and expedited filings. Arya watched silently. Victor turned toward her. "You think this makes you powerful?" he snapped. "You'll regret aligning yourself with—" "Silence," Minjay said. The command cut cleanly. The final screen displayed Victor and Clarissa's consolidated net worth. The number began at its current value. Minjay pressed one final sequence. Legal reclamation orders executed. Corporate control reversed. Receivership filings transmitted. Fraud exposure triggers activated. The number dropped. Rapidly. Victor stared in disbelief as the digits shrank to zero. Clarissa's knees buckled slightly. "You can't erase us," she whispered. Minjay stepped around the console and stood before them. "You erased yourselves." The digital wall dimmed gradually, leaving only faint outlines of closed accounts and reclaimed assets. Victor's shoulders sagged. He no longer looked like an executive. He looked small. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Minjay glanced at the guards. "Remove them." Clarissa looked up sharply. "Remove us where?" Minjay's expression did not soften. "Leave them with only what they gave her." The words landed heavily in the chamber. Victor understood. Nothing. No accounts. No properties. No leverage. The guards stepped forward. Clarissa clutched her coat tightly, but there was nothing inside her purse worth saving. Her cards were already inactive. Her access revoked. Victor attempted one final glare at Arya. "You did this," he said. Arya met his eyes calmly. "No," she replied. "You did." The guards escorted them toward the exit corridor. Their footsteps echoed sharply against the steel floor. Victor's protests faded into hollow silence. Clarissa's heels scraped unevenly as she walked. At the end of the corridor, security doors opened. They were guided out. No vehicles waited for them. No escorts. Just cold air beyond the tower. The doors sealed behind them. Silence returned to the inner sanctum. The digital wall dimmed completely. Minjay turned toward Arya. The glow of the remaining console light reflected softly across her face. She stood taller now. Not because wealth had returned, but because truth had. The storm that had begun at Ashford Manor had ended here. Victor and Clarissa Bennett had been stripped of every illusion they built. Reduced to nothing. Arya remained standing at the center of the chamber, steady and composed. For the first time since the plane vanished from the sky, she did not feel like a ghost. She felt present. And unafraid. The inner sanctum grew quiet after the doors closed behind Victor and Clarissa. The cold blue glow of the digital wall faded into darkness, leaving only the low hum of hidden systems beneath the floor. Arya stood still for a moment. It was over. Not the grief. Not the memory of loss. But the fear. Kang Min-jae moved toward the obsidian console with deliberate calm. His expression was no longer sharp with fury. It had settled into something steady, something reflective. He opened a concealed drawer built seamlessly into the black surface. From it he removed a thick parchment document. Not a financial file. Not a seizure order. Something different. Arya watched as he placed the document on the console and picked up a heavy silver fountain pen. Money is paper, Min-jae said quietly, his voice deep and composed. It can be taken, frozen, stolen, manipulated. He looked up at her. My name is Shield. Arya's breath slowed. The document bore official seals already prepared, legal guardianship papers, notarized and binding. The language was precise, permanent, unambiguous. Min-jae signed first. His strokes were firm and unhesitating. He did not pause to reconsider. When he finished, he turned the parchment toward her. In the eyes of the law, he said, this makes me your legal father. His gaze softened slightly. In the eyes of my world, it makes you untouchable. Arya stepped forward. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the polished obsidian surface. For weeks she had been invisible. Now she stood illuminated beneath quiet power. She took the pen. Her hand trembled only slightly. She thought of Jonathan Bennett, of Eleanor Bennett, of everything they had built with kindness and courage. Then she signed. Arya Bennett Park. The ink dried beneath the lights. A shift occurred, not loud, not dramatic, but real. She was still a Bennett by blood. But now she carried something else. Protection. Strength. Legacy defended by force. Min-jae folded the document carefully and placed it back into the hidden compartment. When he looked at her again, there was no distance in his expression. You will never stand alone again, he said. Arya swallowed, emotion rising unexpectedly in her chest. She had survived hunger, cold, betrayal. But this moment nearly broke her. Thank you, father, she whispered. The word settled into the room. Min-jae did not smile broadly. It was not his nature. But something steady and proud moved behind his eyes. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. The gesture was rare, solid, anchoring. The next morning, the city skyline gleamed beneath a clear horizon. Arya stood at the entrance of Bennett Continental Tower. The glass facade reflected sunlight like polished crystal. Employees had gathered discreetly in the lobby, whispers traveling through the marble hallways. News of Victor's downfall had spread quickly through executive circles. Now the true heir had returned. Arya wore a tailored white suit. Simple. Powerful. Her natural curls framed her face with confidence rather than fragility. Min-jae stood a step behind her, silent but unmistakable in presence. Security personnel lined the perimeter. The elevator doors opened. They ascended to the top floor. When the doors parted, the executive board stood waiting inside the conference room. Men and women who had once watched helplessly as Victor manipulated control now stood straight and attentive. Arya did not rush. She walked directly into her father's office first. The space had been restored. The original mahogany desk gleamed under careful polish. The shelves held familiar awards, philanthropy recognitions, logistics innovations, humanitarian honors. The scent of sandalwood lingered faintly in the air. But there was something new. On the wall behind the desk hung two framed pieces. 1. A portrait of Jonathan and Eleanor Bennett. 2. The adoption decree. Simple. Elegant. Permanent. Arya stepped closer to the desk and ran her fingers lightly across the wood. It no longer felt like a memory. It felt like responsibility. Min-jae remained near the doorway, allowing her the moment. The board is ready, he said quietly. She nodded. Together they entered the conference room. The board members rose. Arya took her seat at the head of the table. For a second, she remembered standing alone in the storm outside Ashford Manor. Now she sat beneath polished lights with authority restored. I will not begin with numbers, she said clearly. I will begin with purpose. The room listened. My parents believed wealth was a bridge, not a throne. That belief remains the foundation of this company. She placed a folder on the table. The Phoenix Haven project launches today. Board members exchanged looks. A nationwide initiative, she continued, to provide housing, legal protection, and education for displaced youth. No child in this city should ever feel invisible. Min-jae observed quietly. Arya's voice did not waver. Funding has already been allocated. Oversight will remain transparent. The mistakes that allowed corruption will not be repeated. A senior board member leaned forward. And the structural safeguards? He asked. They are in place, Arya replied. With additional external audits. She did not need to mention Minjae's influence. It was understood. The meeting continued with clarity and direction. Decisions were made efficiently. Projects were reinstated. When it concluded, Arya stepped out onto the private balcony adjoining the office. The city stretched endlessly before her. Sunlight washed over rooftops and highways. Minjae joined her at the railing. Below, security vehicles waited in disciplined formation. Above, the sky stood clear and open. The storm is finished, he said. Arya exhaled slowly. No, she answered. It forged something stronger. He looked at her. She looked back at the city. We have bridges to build, she said. The wind moved gently around them, carrying no threat, only possibility. She had lost everything once. Now she stood with everything restored and protected. Arya Bennett Park. Daughter of generosity. Daughter of strength. Not a ghost. Not a victim. But a leader. The sun rose higher, casting gold across glass towers and steel structures. The era of fear had ended. The era of purpose had begun. And together they walked back inside, not to defend what was theirs but to expand it. Powerfully ever after. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.